I endured years of stress, then Andrew lied about bills. Days before Christmas, he backstabbed me. I packed and left with my dog. Most of this transpired quite recently. So to provide some context, he and I previously worked for the same contracting company where I managed all the scheduling, marketing, and communicated any complaints to the appropriate individuals. For example, there was an incident where a customer reported paint bleeding through their walls because a worker had electrical issues that started a fire, resulting in smoke damage. The worker used the wrong paint, which led to the bleeding issue, making it an exceptionally challenging task. I handled these responsibilities for several years, enduring inadequate pay and various frustrations, such as my boss dismissing estimates and pressuring me to deceive customers when necessary. It was an all-around frustrating experience, to be honest. Eventually, my boss developed an unhealthy addiction, so my brother and I, who I'll refer to as Andrew, stepped in temporarily. Andrew was reluctant to attend estimates, so I had my boyfriend go, and we would split the commission. However, Andrew would become irritated if too many jobs came in at once and became overwhelmed, but he complained just as much if work was scarce. Whenever my boyfriend was unavailable, I would ask Andrew for help, only to receive complaints about the number of requests. He would question why my boyfriend couldn't go when he was busy. Andrew never seemed to grasp that. I often resorted to using Street View to assess job sites to identify any issues. On occasion, Andrew would insist he needed to see a job site himself, then fail to actually do so, only to later ask me for updates on the work. I repeated this back and forth for about 2 months. At least on one occasion, I received the correct payment when he worked. One day, Andrew completed a job for a client that I had referred to him, involving sealing and repairing her gutters. I did not receive payment from Andrew for my referral. Later, Andrew borrowed gas money from me and promised to pay me back later that week for both the loan and the job, but I have yet to see it. Now, to the part about betrayal. Andrew and I shared a living arrangement with my boyfriend and father-girlfriend. This setup worked well since we all collaborated at the same company. We utilized our earnings to cover rent and utilities. Often, the boss would say that expenses were deducted from our wages without actually processing payments. My boss developed poor habits and stopped dispersing payments, leaving us to shoulder the financial burden. Andrew did not appreciate this. He preferred to socialize and drink instead of handling necessary expenses. Consequently, we fell behind on rent, which created significant tension in the household. While I also enjoyed socializing and drinking on occasion, I always made certain that work was my top priority. I limited my social activities to weekends to avoid impacting important responsibilities. I even helped Andrew build a home bar so that we could have a place to unwind with friends, and covered most of the costs for a Halloween party he wanted to host. I ended up creating an urgent advertisement because our workload had diminished. I essentially explained that our bills were mounting because they were, and that we possessed skills but desperately needed work to get through the holidays. Unsurprisingly, Andrew despised this idea, despite it generating at least 30 estimates. He complained that the ad harmed his pride as a man. Andrew urged me to take down the advertisement, but I refused, as the bills had to be paid and nothing else was working. Eventually, he conceded when he realized how many estimates were coming in. Andrew then proceeded to disregard all the estimates that required his in-person attention. I ended up with very little money to allocate towards rent, so I called the landlord to inform him of my situation. I assured him that he would receive the remaining balance once we had it, and promised that other estimates would help cover the rest. Each person living in the house was responsible for contributing $300 to cover rent, which included gas, sewage, garbage, and water. Services such as cable, internet, phone, and electricity were separate expenses. Andrew continued to neglect his financial responsibilities. I was fortunate to receive $50 from him on one occasion. I practically had to beg for it. Then, a day before Christmas, Andrew and my father devised a plan. The landlord visited to check on things and discuss any issues. I am unaware of the specifics of what was discussed, but afterwards, Andrew and my father informed me that, due to their conversation with the landlord, we all needed to move. They failed to disclose what was said. This situation caused me significant distress, and if it weren't for my boyfriend, I don't know how I would have coped. He offered a great deal of support. After I calmed down mentally, I called the landlord to inquire about the matter. He stated that he wanted no drama, simply to receive the rent, and assured me I had done nothing wrong. At that moment, I felt utterly betrayed by Andrew and my father. I decided to pack my belongings. I could not tolerate any more drama. Apparently, Andrew and my father did not take my decision seriously. One day, they saw me loading my things into the truck, and it finally dawned on them that I was serious. They then attempted to express their affection for me and that they would miss me. Before I left, I managed to run one more advertisement and set up all the scheduling. I informed them that I was resigning, and they would be responsible for themselves from that point onward. They did not take me seriously. I handed them their schedule and reiterated my decision. My father suggested I could work remotely, but I insisted I was done with the constant workplace drama. On the day I was leaving, Andrew was shocked that I was actually going through with it. I asked him if the bills were paid, and he assured me they were, which I later discovered was untrue. Andrew became upset over my decision to take my dog, who had been part of our family for 10 years. They had not taken proper care of her, as they had their own dogs too. They allowed them to urinate and defecate all over the house, which I always had to clean up. The dishes were consistently dirty, and I frequently took on that task. My boyfriend assisted with the cleaning. Andrew would cook, leaving the dirty dishes behind. He could not even rinse them or store the food he used. Then he would question why I could not handle the dishes on a given day, while I always made sure to clean my own. The responsibility for cleaning always fell on me. Andrew bid farewell to me and my dog, and I left. He subsequently checked on me, inquiring about my new living situation, which I was reluctant to disclose. He continued to monitor me throughout my journey, which I found insincere, given his lack of concern previously. Eventually, I divulged my new location because he would not drop the topic. I ensured my boyfriend was comfortable with it first, as he did not like Andrew. Andrew often tried to flirt with my boyfriend, despite claiming he was straight. He would only do this when I was asleep and he had been drinking. Andrew also displayed a self-centered and arrogant attitude, which bothered my boyfriend significantly. Later, my boyfriend disclosed that Andrew had been hiding thousands of dollars, yet could not contribute to our rent, which understandably frustrated me. A few days after my move, Andrew called me, casually mentioning he would be vacationing for his birthday in the same location where I had relocated. I found this hard to believe. My boyfriend preferred that Andrew not visit, so I neither confirmed nor denied the invitation. Andrew did not acknowledge our house rules when I sent them to him, perhaps because he disagreed with them. This was a major red flag for me, since I was the one responsible for maintaining cleanliness in the house, and I did not want him or his friends creating a mess. I specifically laid out rules: no smoking inside, clean up any spills, if you break it you buy it, keep noise levels down, avoid placing food and drinks on the couches, and no drinking alcohol indoors. I thought these guidelines were quite reasonable. I ultimately decided to cut off communication after that, as I wanted to avoid any potential drama he might introduce. I also requested my outstanding pay, which he obviously had, but he never responded to that either. So, am I the antagonist for cutting him off and not trusting him? Should I reassess whether he and his friends should visit if my boyfriend disapproves? Story 2. Met manipulative guy in grade 7 who twisted my feelings for years. His charm hid the truth. Our friendship was a toxic trap. OMG. This narrative centers on a boy I attended school with from 7th to 8th grade, focusing on his treatment of me and raising some questions. I met him when I began my schooling in 7th grade. I was not the only person who faced difficulties with him. My close friend nearly left the school because of his behavior, although their situation eventually improved. However, my circumstances deteriorated. Initially, he was merely bothersome, yet quite self-assured. He enjoyed provoking me, fully aware that it would elicit a response. Whenever I engaged, I was the one who faced consequences from the school. This cycle persisted until the conclusion of high school. He would imitate my reactions from the times he had treated me cruelly and ridicule me. Ultimately, I went along with it because I felt powerless. I grew close to his best friend, which may have led him to feel insecure. He began treating me kindly, making me think I could rely on him. Then, one day in 7th or 8th grade, he sat me down and claimed that everyone 1 year older really disliked me. I had never interacted with them before. I was so bewildered, yet he was so persuasive that I accepted his words and began to believe there was something inherently wrong with me. As time passed, we formed a tight-knit group of around 8 boys, and despite everything, we engaged in meaningful conversations where I confided in him about matters I wouldn't share with others. My family disapproved of him, and we didn't socialize much outside school unless accompanied by the other friends, but during school hours, we spent considerable time together. He possessed a peculiar allure. People admired him, and even girls who were out of his league were drawn to him. On one occasion, he even showed me a video of him engaged in sexual activity, which I found unsettling. Once, when it was just the two of us, he persuaded me that I had bullied him during 7th and 8th grades and had damaged his self-esteem. At that moment, I felt remorseful and apologized, but deep down, I grappled with confusion. The only recollection I had was of him persistently calling me foolish and me eventually retorting with, "I'm not the one who failed mathematics." Yet somehow, he managed to convince me that I had been the antagonist all those years. In high school, we attended numerous parties, and I occasionally found myself in minor trouble. I was easily swayed, a bit of a thrill seeker, but I was never unkind to anyone. There were instances when I attempted to distance myself from him because of his actions, but it felt impossible. If I wanted to maintain friendships and enjoy myself, I had to accept that he would always be present. Despite all that had transpired, I still trusted him because when it was just the two of us, he was incredibly nice and relatable, and I enjoyed those moments. Some of his behaviors included: he recorded me using an offensive term when I was younger. I now recognize it was inappropriate, but at that time, my friends were doing it, and I followed suit. When I asked him to delete the recording, he mocked the way I requested it and claimed he was teaching me a lesson. This ridicule regarding the video persisted for years. He often imitated my request to have it removed. I lived in fear that the video would resurface and jeopardize my life or career. He persuaded me to ask a girl out, fully aware that she would decline. This was a significant step for me because I was extremely shy. I took the risk only because he instilled confidence in me. When I informed him of her rejection, he told me he was aware she would say no, but that he had encouraged me to do it as it would bolster my confidence. He would be brutally candid about various matters. I owned a hat I liked, and he bluntly stated, "I dislike that hat." After that, I never wore it again. He would criticize how I tied my hood strings in a bow. There was always a comment regarding my appearance or attire. Then came the pivotal moment. During the summer prior to our final year of school, we were all going out to clubs, partying, and drinking. I was energetic and enjoyed dancing, but I was no more troublesome regarding substances than the rest of the group. After one party, I overheard multiple people express serious concerns about him, things that were troubling. I won't delve into specifics, but the sheer volume of similar stories made me think that at least some of it had to be true. Over the years, I had heard various troubling remarks. I decided to sever ties with him completely. For a brief period, others did as well. However, gradually, people began to reintegrate him into their lives. I refused to do so. I no longer wanted to be connected to him. We had no communication for at least a month. Eventually, he sent me a text with a screenshot of one of our friends suggesting that I was likely going through something and taking it out on him. He began telling me that others were worried about me and my behavior. He asserted that he had engaged in numerous discussions with people who were concerned, insinuating that I needed help. It felt like he was reversing the blame and portraying the situation as a product of my out-of-control behaviors. But this was untrue. I was merely distancing myself from him. He continually referred to actions I had taken months earlier. What truly upset me was when he accused me of using something profoundly personal he had confided in me as a conversation starter at parties. He had revealed that he had once tied a knot to hang himself, and I had previously mentioned that I had engaged in self-harm. This was not something I would have brought up even in private, let alone in a social setting. He claimed I had used it to initiate discussions, and he had to extricate himself when others inquired about it. It would be utterly insane to use that as a conversation starter. I was so bewildered because I would never do that, regardless of how intoxicated I might have been. He seemed shocked that I could only see one side of things. He kept insisting that many people were concerned about me. Years later, I asked my closest friend if that was accurate. He said no. After a month, I recognized that I needed to make amends, simply to avoid complete isolation. I was reluctant, but he was everywhere, and I couldn't evade events any longer. When we reconciled, he told me I had kicked him while he was down. This felt eerily reminiscent of when he accused me of bullying him in 7th grade. In reality, I had just distanced myself after hearing the allegations. Throughout all of this, I attempted to convey to others how he treated me. Most dismissed it as mere clashing personalities. Nobody took it seriously, except perhaps for 2 individuals. However, I was not merely arguing with him, I was trying to assert myself and withdraw. I felt terribly alone because no one recognized his behavior except for me. It reached a point where I ceased discussing it because I couldn't tell people that he claimed I had utilized his personal information as conversation fodder, as that would indeed be extremely private. I also felt that no one would believe me or that they would consider it trivial. Years have since gone by. I have cut off nearly everyone from high school, excluding my best friend, because I believed it was in my best interest. I descended into depression, drank excessively, and ultimately achieved sobriety. Recently, I encountered some of these individuals again, including him. I had avoided social gatherings for years to steer clear of him. But when I finally attended an event, conversation and laughter flowed just as they always had. And therein lies the issue, our discussions were typically enjoyable. That was a facet of his manipulation. I still cannot understand why he targeted me. Perhaps he felt insecure due to my closeness with his best friend. Maybe he perceived me as easy to manipulate or provoke. He gained my trust, provided me with some fond memories, and then engaged in actions that harmed me, all while convincing me that it was my fault or that something was wrong with me. In hindsight, I feel this situation transcended typical bullying. It resembled an abusive relationship. He would injure me, then behave like the ideal friend. He never spread rumors, our interactions remained private. That aspect makes me contemplate whether he was merely a bully, perhaps he was a sociopath. I suppose I am venting, but I am also seeking clarity. Was he simply a bully, or was there something deeper at play? How could he be so manipulative? Story 3. I fell for an attentive guy after resisting him. Happy for months, then he cheated with a prostitute. His excuses shattered me. It's a lengthy message, but I truly need some feedback as I have not been functioning well lately, so I appreciate anyone who is reading. Hello everyone, I am reaching out for some clarity regarding a situation and whether this individual deserves a second chance. To start, I am a 23-year-old female, and I initially had no interest in my partner, a 23-year-old male. It was he who pursued me and made concerted efforts to impress me. We met at university in August 2023, and I rebuffed his advances until February 2024. After discussing it with my friends, I decided to give dating him a chance because I believed he was a genuinely decent person who would put in consistent effort. His actions included resolving any arguments within a day, occasionally surprising me with flowers since I adore them, paying attention to my preferences, and communicating his feelings whenever he felt hurt, stressed, or sad to ensure it didn't impact our relationship. Compared to other men I have encountered, this was a breath of fresh air. We began dating in March 2024, and I was completely smitten within 3 months. It was the happiest relationship I had ever experienced. Everything seemed perfect, and I enjoyed spoiling him just as he spoiled me. Fast forward to December 6, 2024, the day everything changed. I discovered that he had cheated on me with a prostitute. I confronted him within 12 hours of finding out, and I was grateful for that because discovering it later would have shattered me. When I first asked him why he cheated, he remained silent, allowing me to express my anger. In a fit of rage, I destroyed our pictures and threw out his belongings. He did not respond and simply left when I asked him to. The following day, I received 5 messages from him in which he apologized for his actions and expressed a desire to continue the relationship. I was furious. Was this all I received after being cheated on? I firmly rejected the idea of getting back together and demanded that he return my belongings and leave my life. He requested some time, and after 4 days, I agreed to meet him. He claimed he needed to talk and explain his innocence. We spent 6 long hours in conversation where he attempted to shift the blame onto a friend, stating that he drove him to the escort and paid for it because his friend was broke. He claimed he spent the entire hour driving around while waiting. I felt that this excuse seemed fabricated, so I pressed on, and eventually, he admitted to cheating. He broke down in tears, telling me he didn't want to lose me, that I was incredibly important to him, and that he feared I would never give him a chance again if he told the truth. I left feeling utterly betrayed and manipulated into believing his lies. Afterward, I maintained no contact with him for a week. During this time, I heard from mutual friends that he was in terrible shape. He had attempted to drink and drive, had tried to harm himself, and was constantly lamenting to friends about how badly he had messed up. A week later, he unexpectedly showed up at my doorstep, insisting on coming inside due to his dark thoughts of ending his life. Initially, I hesitated but allowed him in when I noticed his hands were bleeding. He only sat in the corner of my kitchen, watching me cook for an hour. Then he began sobbing, begging me to forgive him, claiming he felt insane without me and that he regretted his mistake immensely. Naturally, I did not forgive him. Since that day, there has been a continuous cycle for 2 months of me expressing my anger while he cries and pleads for me to stay. To summarize the rationale, he provided for his infidelity. We were experiencing difficulties. In November and December 2024, due to significant family issues, he was facing along with constant arguments with his brother, which contributed to his stress and depression. Meanwhile, I was emotionally distancing myself as I had started losing feelings for him and was contemplating a breakup, but I hesitated because I didn't want to leave him when he was already struggling. For 3 weeks, I refrained from any physical affection, including kisses and intimacy, and avoided saying, "I love you," for nearly 2 months, although I continued to support him. He stated that on the day he cheated, he had a particularly nasty fight with his brother and wanted to relieve stress. He had invited me out, but I opted to take an extra shift instead. He felt crushed by my emotional distance and spiraled into negative thoughts, ultimately seeking a sexual release through a blowjob. He insists he did not physically interact with the woman and that his act was solely for relief, after which he felt immense guilt and showered repeatedly to cleanse himself. He reasoned that since many men around him engage in similar behavior, it should be acceptable for him to do it once without repercussions. His brother is known to be a serial cheater. He claimed he was influenced by friends who boast about their sexual encounters and encouraged him to try it as well. He asserted that it was unplanned and simply happened. When I questioned why he did not express remorse initially, why he only sent a few texts the day after I discovered his cheating, and why he now insists on my forgiveness after 2 months, he replied that he recognizes his mistake and truly wants to be with me. He claimed he refrained from pursuing me the first week because he knew I wanted nothing to do with him, but then he realized he couldn't imagine life without me. His mother suggested that he keep begging for my forgiveness because she believes what he did is a significant sin. Here's an interesting detail. I searched his phone and found a query for erotic massages from August 2024, although he did not follow through with it. When I confronted him about this finding and implied that he may have had intentions to cheat on me for an extended period, he claimed he could not recall why he searched for that term, perhaps out of curiosity or peer influence. I lack any proof regarding whether he cheated in August, leaving that topic questionable. What confounds me is why he pretended to be so kind and dedicated to me. Why did he relentlessly pursue me despite my initial lack of interest, even after I told him I would date him only to see if things worked out? He asserted that he could be the best partner I ever had. Our relationship seemed genuinely harmonious, and he treated me well, so what could have prompted him to suddenly decide to cheat? Was he merely a deceptive individual all along, and was I too trusting? I am truly struggling to comprehend this disrespectful behavior, and after 2 months, I am still unable to process it. Thank you for taking the time to read.